to DCS Mig-19P Startup Training. I'm Top Gun with the AKA War Dog Squadron. So I'm going to begin this video by just doing a quick disclaimer that this module's only been out for a couple of days, so it's still very much a work in progress. There's some items here that are potentially bugged or are not implemented yet, and there's a couple of steps here that I've seen discrepancies in between the videos that I've seen online compared to the canned training mission that came with the module, along with comparing it to hot start and cold start aircraft. So I'll go and hit those points as I go through the list. I'll be operating off of my checklist version 1.0, which I'll link in the video description. The items that are in red text are controls that are part of the startup sequence that are already in the correct position, so you can go ahead and just ignore those. But if you come back in to shut down, rearm, repair, and restart the engine, those will be items that you'll still want to check just in case when you're starting back up. The items in blue text are the items that are kind of points of contention right now, that they might be bugged or I've just seen conflicting information regarding. So last but not least, the MiG-19 is a little different compared to the MiG-15 and 21 in the fact that you can actually start this aircraft without ground power, but the manual does advise that if you do that, to minimize the amount of electrical draw that you do until the engines are started. So it suggests doing only fuel tank 1 pump and the right and left generators until the engines are up and running and the generators are supplying power to the aircraft. So, but to do that, you'd be kind of bouncing back and forth back through the checklist. So in order to keep this kind of smooth and simple, I'm going to just perform a standard startup utilizing ground power. So let's go ahead and get that applied. So bring up your communications menu, F8 for ground crew, F2 for ground electric power, F1 for on.
Copy. Ground power is now on.
And while we've got the canopy open, may as well talk to them again to put some weapons on the aircraft. I'll just throw a couple of tanks on for now.
Request rearming. Copy.
And while they're working on that, I don't like dealing with the outside noise. If I'm flying with a big mission with a bunch of people, in order to cut down on the ambient noise, I close the canopy pretty early on. So I'll go ahead and close the canopy. And the canopy lock are these two handles, one on either side. They automatically spring back into the lock position when they close. Later, when you come back in and land, if you want to open the cockpit, just something I've seen is that when you go to open, it takes a good 3 to 5 seconds for it to respond to the key mapping. So just bear that in mind. So it's not going to be instantaneous response like most other aircraft. So let's do canopy pressurization valve. That's kind of easy to miss. It's on the back end of this side only for the cockpit canopy control. So pull this into the rear position. And we'll go ahead and turn on the rheostats for the left and right interior lights so that when the battery kicks on, we'll have more light in here, because these controls underneath the sill here on either side are hard to see. It's pretty dark in this cockpit, even in broad daylight. Next is oxygen shutoff valve, which is kind of similar to the MiG-15 valve. But the MiG-15, you can do, I think, like maybe 2 revolutions and then it's either full on or full off. This thing will spin forever. And the only thing that changes is this little flap pops up and down. And I see this control in the same position whether you're in a hot start aircraft or a cold. And when you look at the oxygen gauge, you see the traditional black and white alternating lung icon that shows you taking breaths and whatnot. Regardless of what position I put this in, I don't see that blinking. So either this is currently bugged or it's not implemented yet. I've also like zoom climbed up to like 30,000 feet with this in either position, and I've never gotten hypoxia either. So I'm guessing it's probably bugged or they just haven't implemented it. So we'll just move on from there. Next is the oxygen air diluter. I need this to the mix position. Need to click on the center part of the panel to move that up. And then next is suit oxygen supply up to auto. You have to click on the actual knob itself to move it up to the top of the panel. Let's go ahead and put the battery up to on. And now we got our rheostat lights. Left and right generators up to on. And fuel tanks 1, 2, 3, and 4 up to on. Flight instruments and cockpit heater up to on. Anti-skid up to on. That one's already up by default. Engine start up to on. Fire extinguisher up to on. These next two are one of those points of contention also. Emergency arc radio up to on and emergency AGI up to on. If you jump into a hot start aircraft, those are actually off. But meanwhile, in the actual manual, it calls for them on. So there's some discrepancies there. So I'm not really sure if those are supposed to be on or not. Radio up to on. And RSU-4V radio frequency. Unlike the MiG-15 could actually dial in a specific frequency, although the radio is very archaic. This one's more modern. It's just a set of presets, just push buttons. So unfortunately, you can't dial in a frequency manually, so you just have these presets to deal with. These have to be set in the mission editor, so you'll have to set these yourself, or the person who's designing the mission will have to do that and then list out in your kneeboard or briefing what those channels correspond to for frequencies. But these are just simple push buttons pushing in and out. And we can go ahead and contact ATC to get clearance for engine start. Although I've seen sometimes they respond and sometimes they don't.
Call key. In field. 1-1. Request startup.
Next is navigation lights. It's a four-way switch. It's hard to see even with the lights on. You got 10%, 30, 100%, and off. First click will take you to 100%. And now we're pretty much ready for engine start. So go ahead and move the left throttle into idle position. And I don't think you can click on those in the cockpit to do that, so you'll need to keybind those to something. And pull down the cover and press and hold the left engine start for about 3 seconds and then recover. And we need to wait until the RPM gets up to 4,000. And once that's steadied up, we'll go ahead and do the right engine up over the idle. And same thing here. So right engine start for about 3 seconds and then recover. And once both engines are up and operating, you can go ahead and contact ground crew to disconnect the ground power.
Chief, turn off the ground power. Copy. Ground power is now off.
Okay, so next is beacon R alt. So radar altimeter basically. Up to on. And go ahead and set your minimum altitude for the radar altimeter. You've only got a couple of settings. You can't just set it to whatever you want. And bear in mind that this is of course in meters, so we'll set it to like 300 meters. Next is MUS2 system stab, up to on. Aileron trimmer effect, up to on. GIK AGI, up to on. Basically just going down the row. Artificial horizon, go ahead and hit the cage. GIK1 compass align, you need to press and hold this button here for about 5 seconds. And that will take approximately 3 minutes to do its alignment. Cockpit pressurization, aft position. This is another one that's kind of been a little, had a bit of a discrepancy about it. So I'm assuming aft is the correct position for pressurization, but I'm not positive of that. That may change. Same thing goes for the cockpit ventilation as far as whether it needs to be in the open or closed position. Let's go ahead and set our flaps into takeoff. Nose wheel brake down to the off position. And I always keep forgetting about this, so how I tend to remember it is, if you're down on the ground, it's pointing to the ground. If you're up in the air, so you're coming into land or you're trying to go up into the air, move it to the horizontal position. Signal flare dispenser, forward to the on position. And this is just my personal preference. I mean, it's handy, for the odd situation where you need to identify somebody quickly and whatnot, but it's up to you. ASP 5N gun sight to cage position. It's already in that position by default. PBD heat in the up position. Emergency TP 156. These two are basically the heat for your pitot and your secondary, your backup pitot heat. You want to do those just before you're ready to taxi and take off because you don't want those burning out. Go ahead and do sight heat up to on, sight up to on. ISMERD, that's how I pronounce it anyways, up to on, that's basically the power to your radar. O57K up to on, left cannon up to on, and right cannon up to on. These last two are dealing with like gun cameras. I don't know if they even do anything in the sim, or if there's any kind of footage that it captures or not. Probably not. So those can probably be left down, but that's another one of those points of contention. Radar mode control switch. We'll move this into the middle standby position. If you come into land, the Mig-19 is set up in such a way that it's basically geared off the landing gear, so as long as the landing gear is down, the radar cannot be active. So it's similar to the weight on wheels for like the F-18 and other aircraft. You can't have the radar operating on the ground. But for right now, we just put it to standby just to get it warming up. At this point, go ahead and contact ATC for taxi clearance. And we also need to contact the ground crew to remove the chocks, which is under F4.
Chief, remove the wheel chocks. Copy. Wheel chocks are now removed.
If you need it, your taxi light is over here by the navigation light. Taxi light is the down position, landing is up. Obviously, we don't really need it for daylight. And once you get over to the assigned runway and you contact ATC, they'll give you your QFE for barometric pressure. If you need to adjust that, it's down here. Oops, sorry. Over here, rather. The readout is actually at the bottom right here. Once you're lined up on the runway, then at that point you're going to want to go ahead and switch your nose brake to the horizontal position. And in preparation for takeoff, you'll also want to take the lever lock off of your landing gear so that you can raise them without having to fight it. And last but not least, verify air use system is in takeoff mode, which is this light right here. So once you're off the ground, wheels up, flaps up, after that you need to arm your cannons, so left and right. It's similar to how the Mig-21 operates, so just press and hold it for about 2 or 3 seconds until the weapon ready lights turn on down here. There's one for each gun. And then finally go ahead and put your radar mode into full on to activate the radar. And that's pretty much it. At that point, you're good to go. Like I said, this is still pretty early, and as we've gone over, there's a few things in here that definitely are works in progress that have yet to be hammered out completely. So I may end up redoing this video from scratch here at some point in the near future once they've got more of this refined. So, but in the meantime, hopefully this has been helpful. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please let me know. Thank you.